Hey guys, welcome back. So now we're jumping back into Venom, and this time around we're catching up with Eddie, who's made his way to find Kang. But with doing so, and Eddie being brand new to the whole time traveling thing, he finds that Kang has a lesson or two that he wants to teach. So let's get into it. But first, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch the spills every week. And don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squat up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so for this one we start off with Eddie in the garden all the way at the end of time, and really with the way that this picks up, it's very much a continuation from issue 5, when we had seen Meridius leave Eddie here with the other Kings in Black just before he had made his time jump. But while Eddie's here, he's noticing a couple of suspicious things, because these other two symbiotes or Kings in Black, they're both watching Eddie but from a distance, and at this point in time Eddie hasn't seen Bedlam since their last scuffle, and he still hasn't had a chance to talk to Finnegan, who, like we'd seen before, was trying to tell Eddie something, but he never got to when Bedlam attacked him. And when Eddie went to save Finnegan, Bedlam then turned on Eddie and Finnegan was like, yeah, go ahead and kill him, which for Eddie was also very confusing. But for Eddie, while he's waiting in this garden for Meridius, he does notice a familiar feeling of this place, with him not being able to come and go as he pleases and these two other guys watching him from a distance, and it reminds him of prison. And for a moment, Eddie's like, okay, well if this is a prison, let me hit my tin cup against the bars and try to communicate with some other inmates. And for that reason, Eddie tries to reach out to the other symbiotes that make up this place, because if you guys remember, Meridius said that all those other symbiotes are asleep, but when Eddie reaches out to them, he can't detect them at all. So it has him thinking like, what happened to these guys? What did Meridius do to them? And really for Eddie, with all these thoughts going through his mind, it also has him thinking that he hasn't been the only voice in his head for a long time. And it's kind of causing him to freak out, because all he can think of is the worst. And it also has him feeling alone, which then makes Eddie think of the last time that he had felt this alone, which for him was back when the Venom symbiote had first found him. And when Eddie thinks about this, he's like, man, I abandoned my other to play hero, to play God, and he had pretty much did the same with Dylan. But with him thinking about the symbiote and Dylan, he then sees these flashes of moments in time as if he's right there. And when he sees Dylan, it's in the moment where Bedlam has Dylan and the Venom symbiote hemmed up. And seeing this causes Eddie to flip, even though he's not sure in this moment what that glimpse meant or what exactly is going on with Dylan or who Dylan is looking at. And at first he thinks like, okay, when Meridius gets back, he'll help me. But then he's like, nah man, Meridius is gonna help me the same way he did all these other symbiotes that are quote unquote sleep right now and undetectable. And right then Eddie's like, okay, I gotta get out, get out, get out. And with them doing this, he successfully makes his jump. But he then lands in the 602nd century inside of a war symbiote, which immediately detects Eddie's mind link as it activates. And it's right there where Eddie's just like, where did I jump to and what year is this? And right away, this war symbiote that he's jumped into, it acknowledges him as the pilot and it answers his questions. And that's when it tells him he's on his current homeworld, Earth, and it's the year 60,134. But also it lets Eddie know that he's on the flagship Nathaniel in the Conqueror's service. And Eddie tries to get more information from this war symbiote, but then it just tells him that it needs the pilot to supply more information. And right then he's more or less like, yeah, I got nothing for you. Because even with the information provided, he doesn't know what's going on here. But even now, much like before, Eddie can feel the time stream pulling him back. So again, he has to find something to center his mind on to keep him in the here and now, which for whatever reason makes me think of the Days of Future Past movie. But for Eddie, fortunately something comes along and it does exactly that, because as soon as he turns around, a ton of soldiers are rushing at him and they're just screaming, unauthorized pilot, surrender your symbiote for the Conqueror's glory. And initially this war symbiote, it starts to flag Eddie with all types of errors because it's fighting its own soldiers. But Eddie turns this around by asking the symbiote suit like, hey buddy boy, can you handle these guys? So it analyzes the situation and it knocks all of these soldiers out, while going further to explain to Eddie that it's a war star class Type 2 Battle Clintar, and for that reason it doesn't like being called buddy boy. But Eddie's like, you know, I gotta think of something to call you, and War Star does sound better, so Eddie goes with that, because in the past symbiotes have usually gotten such violent names, whether it was Scream or Riot, Phage, Venom, like come on, or even Carnage for that matter. And really here Eddie's like, you know, he's trying to turn a new leaf, and this symbiote finds War Star as a much more acceptable designation, much better than Buddy Boy. But as they make their way forward, the suit signals Eddie for a battle warning, because there's a Type 4 Clintar detected ahead. But with seeing this huge thing, Eddie plays it smart because he knows that one-on-one that this thing would just destroy him. And by way of the mind link with his Warstar suit, he finds a way to disrupt the ship's shields, and it just sends this thing flying off into space, which is a real quick introduction and exit for this guy. Unless this is like the origin of Bedlam, who knows. But with Eddie getting rid of this thing, he then notices that it was guarding a door. But as soon as he approaches the door, he finds that it's not locked, and behind it, it's Kang. But for Eddie, with him seeing Kang in this room, it's not a surprise to him, because again, the information from the Warstar suit, it's a two-way street, which allowed Eddie to see who's in charge here. And not to mention all the soldiers running around saying "for the Conqueror's glory" aboard the flagship Nathaniel, like that might have given it away a little bit too. But for Eddie, with him walking in here and seeing Kang, this is his first time meeting him. But for Kang, he lets Eddie know that he's known him for years, across eons, which is always a funny thing because much of Kang's past is everyone else's future, with a mix-up of many years before anyone from our present day was born. But it's here where Kang goes on to tell Eddie that 10,000 years ago, for Kang, him and Eddie had met on a bridge much like this one. And when they did, Kang had shown Eddie the universe, each galaxy the size of a single grain of sand. And Kang had told Eddie if he'd played his game on his board by his rules, then all of this could be Eddie's, which really sounds like the devil tempting Jesus on the mountaintop type of thing. And in this moment, Eddie has a similar response. He's like, Kang, did I tell you where you could shove it? But what's interesting is that Kang tells Eddie that his response was quite different at the time, because 10,000 years ago, Eddie was more so in the mood to listen. Which right there really raises the question as far as why was it that Eddie was so cooperative at that point in time? And also how far ahead of this Eddie is that Eddie? But also in this moment, Kang goes to attack Eddie, and not so much in a malicious manner, but really more so as if he's starting Eddie's training. From here in this moment when Eddie first met Kang. And as he does, you can see the images behind them of different moments in time just changing. And through the course of this, Eddie just kind of figures it out as he goes, and he gets the Warstar suit to help him out by telling it that this is just a defensive drill, and if they kick Kang off the ship, then they get a bonus. And really that's how Eddie gets the suit to fire different projectiles in order to combat Kang in this sparring session / training that Kang has started with no warning. But through the course of this, with every attack that Eddie's using, Kang is able to stop it either with the time sword or with his shields, but it's pretty hard to attack someone who can freeze time, because every attack he's just going to slow down, and it's nearly impossible to connect. And it's here where Kang tells Eddie that he's in a battle that he has no understanding of, while waging a war that he understands even less. And really and truly his intention here is to help Eddie. But Eddie's still not sure if he can trust Kang, because he's Kang, and his reputation precedes him. Or recedes him. You know what I'm trying to say. But for Eddie, with him hearing this and going through this sparring match, he then tells the Warstar suit to scale him down to his normal size, but then also create for Eddie the same weapon that Kang has, essentially making this Warstar suit make him a time sword. And when Kang sees this, he tells Eddie that according to Eddie's timeline, this is the first lesson that Kang had taught him, which is to know when your enemy has a superior weapon and then make it your own. But then when Kang says this, he then parries Eddie and cuts his hand off, which in a matter of seconds just grows back. And for Eddie, when this happens, he's more humiliated than actually physically hurt, and as his hand grows back, he finds that he feels more stable, unlike moments earlier where he could feel the time stream pulling at him. And it's here where Kang lets Eddie know that he used the time sword to pin Eddie's temporal form in this moment, because like we'd seen before, Eddie had been struggling with resisting the pull from the time stream. And Kang is able to solve that problem for Eddie in this moment. But this also raises a lot of suspicion for him, because he's thinking how does Kang know so much about him? Because again, Eddie's not really sure if he can trust Kang. But throughout this conversation, he does realize that at some point in time he trusted Kang enough to the point of where Eddie told Kang all of this information. But even with Eddie struggling with the idea of whether or not he can trust Kang, he does decide that he'll cautiously trust Kang for now. Because for Eddie, as far as what he knows, this is the only way he can get the help that he needs in order to find his way to Dylan. But then it's here throughout this conversation where Kang is like, well, you gotta excuse me because I need to go to the little Conqueror's room. But for Kang, instead of heading to the restroom, we see him head to his private quarters where he's talking to someone who's really more or less asking for Kang's feedback on his encounter with Eddie. and Kang lets this person know that Eddie was suspicious, confused, and quite violent. But even with Eddie's suspicion about Kang's motives, Kang tells this person that Eddie hasn't figured out that Kang is baiting him for someone else's trap. And the main reason why Eddie hasn't figured it out at this point is because who could possibly plan for this random appearance that Eddie's made at this random point in time, which brought him right to the flagship Nathaniel. And when Kang says who could possibly plan for that, and it's right then when we see who he's talking to, and it is of course Meridius, who again has just been creating this path before Eddie with intention, while also just making it seem like Eddie's carving this path on his own. And that right there makes you think like, is he? Or is he? But either way, we'll have to wait and see. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all of your support. And for anyone who's new here, who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below so we can go to patreon.com/dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.